Welcome to episode 8 of From the Library. Even though the United States was founded by Christians, by Protestants, with some influence by the Roman Catholic Church, the founders unfortunately were consistent with the idea of Protestantism, which is built on the idea of rebellion and individualism. So America was the great experiment, as they say, where people were tired of the oppression of the governments they were currently living under. So they came to the New World and sought to make a new life with a different form of government. And though they may have intended well, things went as one would expect them to go. When a nation is built on the philosophy of individualism and isolation in some degree, you see, or you did see, small groups of people, oftentimes just a family, surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of acres, miles and miles of distance between them and their neighbors. So a very practical form of isolation and individualism. So as time progressed, the nation moved further and further away from a Christian worldview, allowing for slavery, which was a really horrible, inhumane way to treat another human being. And even the change, the abolition, the making illegal of slavery was handled completely wrong. One does not simply just outlaw slavery and then just leave these people to their own responsibility. There should have been a slow curve of a transition out of slavery, out of being uneducated. The government should have stepped in, should have educated the children, should have provided land, should have provided means, and transitioned people out of that. The years that followed, quite a few years followed before the 60s with Martin Luther King Jr., and even that with President Johnson's work ended up being very contrary to the strength and health of the family. From the 60s onward, things started a rapid decline. The free drugs, the influx of Eastern religion, the free sex of the 70s, the AIDS of the 80s, the slow normalization of homosexuality, and what we're seeing today with the transgender movement, with the sexualization of children. All of these things are the expected result of the worldview that formed the United States. So even in just the last few years, we've seen an increasingly rapid decline, a destruction of the family, a destruction of health. Mental health has become such an issue. Suicide rates have skyrocketed. The government is becoming more and more oppressive, more and more controlling. We need to understand just how different a world we live in now when we compare that thinking of that world to the Christian worldview. It's no longer the case where we can just say, I'm a Christian, because that means a variety of things to a lot of different people. So when we appeal to right and wrong, we can't assume that those what we are speaking to are even on the same page as we are with those definitions. We can't presuppose that their beliefs are anything like ours. We've gotten to the point where the majority of the people have lost the Christian worldview, even though the first, say, 150 years of the United States was still hanging on to Christian beliefs, had a Christian foundation. That is no longer the case. The Western culture has declined into really neo-paganism, where pretty much anything goes. Whatever you feel like believing, you can make up, and that is your standard. And when a standard is self-defined, it really means nothing. It doesn't make sense to say, well, I believe X, Y, and Z, and then maybe a month later you believe A, B, and C. When someone can just change their beliefs on a whim, all standard of objectivity is lost. So as Christians, we need to understand the culture we live in. We need to be thoughtful and well prepared and understand how to interact with people, how to reach them, not by, as they say, Bible thumping, not by knocking on doors. Christianity from the beginning has been defined as love. It is that which should define the Christian. It's unfortunate that the idea of love is not the standard that most people have. It's unfortunate that when someone thinks of a Christian, loving and kind is not the first ideas that come to mind. We need to take back the label of love, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. We need to be the image of Christ to the world, and we need to see all people, all men, all women, in the image of Christ, and know that everybody wants to be loved, but we need to understand the world that they are coming from and the world that they are speaking from. In addition to this idea of understanding the world around us, the completely different world in which we live compared to, say, 100 years ago, we need to understand what it means to be a Christian. We need to understand ourselves. We need to acknowledge our own weaknesses, our own sinfulness. Humility is the other thing that needs to define us as believers. If we are judgmental, if we are name-calling, if we are unkind, that is not going to communicate love to those with whom we interact. Humility is possibly, with the exception of love, the greatest characteristic that a Christian can have. If you understand that you are sinful, if you think of yourself as lower and weaker than everyone else, you're going to look at people differently. The person who is arrogant, the person who thinks they are better than everybody else, the person who says, well, I had enough sense to reach out to God, therefore I'm better than you, that communicates the wrong message. We need to understand that we are weak. We sin far too often. And just because somebody else has sins that we find detestable or unappealing does not mean that they are worse than us. They're just different than us. We need to think of our own sins as the worst of all. We need to be gracious with others and harsh on ourselves. If we can't see past other people's weaknesses, then we've completely missed the point. We have no idea what other people have gone through. We have no idea what kind of struggles, what kind of abuses others have suffered. We need to assume the best of others. We need to understand that our weakness is our responsibility and their sins are their responsibility. If we love, we're doing the right thing.